"No man survived the night with me," said Giant Bride, but the rancher said, "Just try me and see." The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide open plains of the ranch, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The wind whispered across the tall grass, carrying with it the faint smell of earth and hay. In the distance, a lone figure moved with quiet purpose, the rhythmic sound of hooves against the ground echoing across the empty fields. This was the rancher, a man known for his strength, courage, and an unshakable calm that came from years spent living close to the land. He was a man who faced every challenge head-on, whether it was a stubborn horse, a wild animal, or the harsh elements of nature. Life on the ranch had taught him patience, endurance, and the value of quiet observation. For years, he had lived alone. Friends and neighbors knew him as a reliable, hard-working man, respected for his skills and his unwavering determination. Yet beneath his rough exterior there was a gentleness that few had seen. He cared for the land, the animals, and the people around him, though he rarely showed it in words. Solitude had become his companion, but it never made him lonely. There was a sense of freedom in it, a sense of living life on his own terms. But that morning, as he checked the fences and moved among the grazing cattle, a new rumor reached him. It was a story that had traveled quickly through the small town nearby, whispered from one person to another, each version growing taller than the last. The story was about a woman, a giant bride who had arrived in the area. People spoke of her in hushed tones, calling her fierce, intimidating, and almost impossible to handle. They said that she had come from far away, and that every man who had tried to spend time with her had failed. The words were dramatic, almost like a tale from another world, but the effect was immediate. Curiosity. The rancher paused, leaning against the fence, listening to the wind as if it might carry more than just the scent of grass and dirt. His brow furrowed slightly, not with worry but with intrigue. "No man survived the night with her," people said.
It sounded like an exaggeration, yet there was something in the way they spoke: respect, fear, and perhaps a hint of awe.
For the first time in a long while, the rancher felt a spark of excitement. This was a challenge unlike any other. Not a fight against nature or a stubborn animal, but a test of character, patience, and courage against another human being. He could have ignored it, of course. Plenty of men would have.
Most of the townspeople were already warning him, "Stay away," they said. "She is too strong, too fierce, too unpredictable."
No one can handle her. But the rancher was not like most men. Broken fences and wild horses that seemed untamable. He had spent nights in freezing weather and days under the scorching sun. He knew the value of respect, of understanding, and of patience, and something in him told him that this woman, the giant bride, was different. Not someone to fear, but someone to understand. The next few days were filled with observation. The rancher listened to the townspeople piecing together what he could about her. She lived on the edge of the town, in a small house surrounded by thick trees and wild gardens. Those who had seen her described her as towering, with a presence that demanded attention. He and even the air seemed to shift around her. People spoke of her independence, her sharp mind, and the strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. She was a woman who had learned to protect herself, to face life on her own terms, and to trust very few. Despite all the warnings, the rancher's curiosity only grew. There was something about a person who could hold the world at a distance, someone who had faced challenges and emerged stronger. He admired strength, not just in himself but in others, and he recognized that this woman had something rare, a spirit that would not be tamed easily. It was not just her size or her boldness that intrigued him. It was her confidence, the way she carried herself as if she had already faced every storm life could throw at her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in shades of orange and purple, the rancher made a decision. He saddled his horse, checking the ropes and reins with practiced hands. The wind rustled through the trees as he rode toward the edge of town, toward the place where the giant bride lived. Each step of the horse seemed to echo his own heartbeat, steady, calm, but filled with anticipation. He was not going there to boast or to prove himself in the way some men might. He went there with respect, with courage, and with an open mind. As he approached her home, he could see the outline of the house against the darkening sky. It was surrounded by wild gardens, tall trees, and a small fence that seemed more decorative than protective. But smoke rose gently from a chimney, curling into the cool evening air. He dismounted quietly, patting his horse, before letting it graze on the sparse grass nearby. The rancher walked to the door, each step measured and deliberate. He could feel his own pulse quicken, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was not just a meeting. It was a moment that might change everything. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet evening. Moments passed before the door opened, revealing her. She was even taller than he had imagined, her presence commanding and powerful. Breath, her eyes sharp and discerning, met his without hesitation. There was a weight in her gaze, a mix of curiosity and caution. She did not smile. She did not speak immediately. She simply studied him, as if measuring his strength, his intent, and his courage. But the rancher, undeterred, offered a calm smile. "Good evening," he said simply. "Psst, I heard stories about you." Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing his words. "Stories?" she asked, her voice firm and steady. "Day. No man survived the night with me. What makes you different?" The rancher chuckled softly. Breath. "I don't know if I am different. I only know that I respect strength, and I don't run from challenges." She studied him a moment longer, her lips pressing into a thin line. Narration. Then she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Breath. She was cautious, testing him silently, and he understood. Respect, after all, was earned, not demanded. Inside, the house was simple but warm. The walls were lined with shelves of books, tools, and photographs. A fire burned gently in the hearth, casting a soft glow across the room. It was clear that she valued independence, hard work, and thoughtfulness. The rancher took it all in silently, observing, listening, and learning. Their conversation began cautiously. They spoke of the land, of animals, and of life in the town. He shared stories of the ranch, of storms he had faced and lessons learned through years of hard work. She listened, occasionally interjecting with sharp, thoughtful questions. The dialogue was a careful dance of words, each testing the other's character and patience. Neither tried to dominate the conversation, yet both measured each response carefully. As the evening wore on, the rancher realized something important. The giant bride was not intimidating because she wanted to be cruel. She was intimidating because she had learned to protect herself in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Her strength was not just physical, it was mental, emotional, and deeply rooted in her experiences. And for the first time, he felt that meeting her was not about conquering a challenge, but about discovering a connection that was rare and valuable. Night began to settle over the town, and the rancher rose to leave, thanking her for the conversation. She nodded slightly, her expression unreadable, yet there was a hint of acknowledgement, a recognition of his courage and respect. As he mounted his horse and rode back toward the open plains, he felt a spark of anticipation. This was only the beginning. The rumor of the giant bride had brought him to her door. But it was the quiet strength, the sharp mind, and the unyielding spirit that made him want to return. He understood that this was a person who had faced life on her own terms, and he respected her for it. And in that respect, a bridge had been built. one that neither fear nor reputation could destroy. The rancher rode on through the cool night air, the stars above him reflecting on the quiet determination in his heart. The giant bride was a mystery, yes, but she was also a challenge he was willing to meet, not with force or recklessness, but with understanding, patience, and courage. He knew the next meeting would test them both, but he was ready. For the first time in years, he felt the thrill of something new, something unpredictable, and something that might just change the rhythm of his life entirely. The plain stretched endlessly before him, dark and calm under the moonlight, and somewhere in that distance a giant bride watched the night, wary yet curious, unaware that the rancher's quiet determination had already begun to reach her. That night, neither the townspeople's warnings nor the stories mattered. What mattered was the spark of curiosity, the courage to face the unknown, and the first step toward a meeting that would test both strength and character. Brask. And so the rancher rode on, ready to discover what it truly meant to meet the giant bride, face to face, heart to heart, and soul to soul. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, spilling golden light across the fields and hills. The rancher woke early, as he always did, but today there was a different sense of anticipation in the air. He had met the giant bride the evening before, and though their first encounter had been cautious and quiet, it had left an impression on both of them. He could not stop thinking about her. Not her reputation, not the stories the townspeople had told, but her presence, her spirit, and the quiet strength she carried in every movement and every glance.
Bed. He had ridden past her home several times in the last few days, observing from a distance, but today he decided to go closer. There was no rush, no intention of overwhelming her or forcing anything. He simply wanted to understand her world better.
The trail to her home was uneven and narrow, winding through tall grass and clusters of wildflowers. The rancher moved with ease, his boots pressing firmly into the earth, his horse stepping carefully but confidently. He knew the land, and he knew patience. Both would be important if he hoped to gain her trust. Breath. When he reached her property, he dismounted quietly, tethering his horse to a sturdy tree nearby. The air was fresh with the smell of wild grass and soil, and birds sang from the branches above. Her house was simple, almost austere, but it radiated warmth. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, a signal that she was already awake and tending to her morning chores. The rancher knocked on the door gently, mindful of her independence. He had learned in life that respect often opened doors more quickly than force or persistence. She answered the door almost immediately, her eyes sharp and assessing. The sunlight hit her, highlighting her tall frame and strong features. Breaths. She looked like a person who had faced challenges head-on and emerged stronger for them. She did not smile, but there was a faint hint of curiosity in her gaze. "Braven, you're here early," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I wasn't expecting anyone today. I wanted to see how your morning begins," the rancher replied with a slight smile, "and maybe learn a little about how you manage your place." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical, but did not turn him away. Instead, she gestured for him to step inside. The house was warm, the fireplace crackling gently, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, tools, and jars of preserved food. Every detail spoke of careful planning, self-sufficiency, and a life lived fully and independently. "Most men would have run the other way after hearing the stories about me," she said, crossing her arms. "But you're different." Why? The rancher looked around the room, taking in the details, then met her gaze. "I don't run from challenges," he said simply. "And I respect strength when I see it. That's all."
Her eyes softened for a brief moment, then hardened again.
Strength isn't always what it seems, she said. People see it as physical or loud, but the real strength is surviving life, making your own choices, and protecting yourself when the world isn't kind. He nodded slowly. I know. I've faced my share of storms, and I've learned that strength comes in many forms. For a while, they moved in silence, studying each other. Neither rushed, neither tried to dominate. It was a careful dance of observation, a test of character as much as conversation. Breaths. The rancher noticed the small details, the way she moved with precision, how her eyes scanned the room constantly, how her hands were steady and confident. She in turn noticed his calm demeanor, the way he listened without judgment, and the quiet strength in his posture and expression. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer now. Most men don't want someone like me. They want someone who will follow, who will listen, who won't question. Breaths. I've never had that and I've never wanted it. I don't follow blindly, he said. I respect people who stand strong on their own. That's not weakness. It's courage. She studied him carefully, then nodded slightly. Perhaps you're the first man who understands that. The rancher smiled faintly. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just willing to try. The conversation shifted naturally after that. They talked about their lives, her challenges, his experiences on the ranch, the lessons they had learned along the way. There was humor in their exchanges, a shared appreciation for honesty and directness. Brent. Yet beneath the laughter and casual talk, a tension remained, the unspoken understanding that both were measuring the other, testing boundaries, and gauging trust.
At one point, she challenged him.
Let's see if you're as capable as you say. There's work to be done around here. Lifting, carrying, organizing. Most men tire easily or complain. The rancher chuckled softly. I've handled heavy loads before. I can manage. They worked together in the garden and the small barn. She lifted bales of hay with ease, organized tools, and tended to animals with a practiced hand. He followed her lead, matching her strength without hesitation, showing patience and endurance. It was not a competition, but a silent acknowledgement of respect and capability. Each action built trust. Each shared effort dissolved some of the walls they both carried.
By afternoon, a sense of camaraderie had begun to form.
Perhaps. She still maintained her fierce independence, but she started to see him as someone reliable, someone steady, and someone she could measure against her own strength without feeling threatened. The rancher, in turn, admired her skill, her determination, and the quiet confidence that radiated from her. He did not underestimate her, nor did he attempt to change her. Instead, he matched her pace, respected her space, and demonstrated that strength could coexist with understanding. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they paused for a moment of quiet reflection. The wind moved through the trees, rustling leaves and carrying the scent of wildflowers. The rancher looked at her and she looked at him, and for a brief moment, words were unnecessary. There was a silent acknowledgement that something meaningful was forming, a connection built on respect, understanding, and mutual recognition of strength. She finally spoke, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant.
You're not like the others, she admitted. Most men are intimidated by me or want to control me.
You respect me, and you're not afraid. The rancher nodded. I respect strength, no matter the form it takes. And I'm not here to control anything that isn't mine to control. The day ended with them sharing a simple meal in her modest kitchen. Breath. They talked and laughed, but there was also a depth to their conversation, a willingness to reveal small truths about themselves, to acknowledge past hardships, and to recognize the courage it took to live fully and independently.
They were careful, measured, but also genuine.
The giant bride felt a small shift within herself, a recognition that this man might be different, someone she could trust, someone who could meet her on equal ground. As the evening fell, the rancher prepared to leave. He mounted his horse. But before riding away, he turned to her and said, "I'll be back. There's more to see, more to learn, and more to understand." Despise. "If you're willing." She watched him leave, a mix of curiosity and caution in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of anticipation rather than apprehension. The stories of men failing to survive the night with her were still true, in a way, but this man was different. He did not approach her with fear, with lust, or with arrogance. He approached with respect, patience, and courage, the rarest combination she had ever encountered. The rancher rode back across the open plains, the sky now dark with stars, each one sparkling like a promise of what might come. His mind was filled with thoughts of her, of the moments they had shared, and of the quiet understanding that had begun to form between them. He knew the next encounter would test them both, but he was ready. He had learned that strength was not about power alone. It was about patience, understanding, and mutual respect. Brad. And he felt certain that this giant bride, with all her courage and independence, was someone worth meeting again. Back at his ranch, he paused for a moment, looking out over the fields. The night was calm, but inside a storm of curiosity, excitement, and anticipation stirred. He thought about her strength, her confidence, and her fierce independence. He knew that winning her trust would not be easy, and perhaps that was the appeal. A challenge unlike any other, one that required patience, respect, and genuine understanding. And somewhere in the distance, the giant bride watched her own land, sensing that the quiet, steady man she had met was not like the others. He was different. He might survive the night, not just in stories or reputation, but in a way that mattered, by meeting her strength with his own, by respecting her independence, and by proving that courage and understanding could coexist. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would hold, but a connection had begun, one built on respect, curiosity, and the quiet acknowledgement of strength. The giant bride had always been cautious, wary of those who entered her life, but for the first time, she felt the possibility of trust. The rancher, seasoned by life and tempered by solitude, felt the thrill of discovery, not just of her, but of what it meant to meet someone truly formidable and human at the same time. The night fell over the plains, stars twinkling above, and the world seemed to pause. The rancher and the giant bride, each in their own place, understood that the story between them was only beginning. Respect, courage, and curiosity had opened the door to something neither had anticipated, but both would embrace. The journey had begun, and neither would turn away. The sun had disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving a soft silver glow from the moon to light the plains.
The rancher rode slowly toward the giant bride's home, the quiet night wrapping around him like a blanket.
There was a sense of anticipation in the air, an unspoken tension that made every sound, the rustle of grass, the distant cry of an owl, even the soft clop of his horse's hooves, feel important. He had spent the day reflecting on their previous encounters, thinking about her strength, her independence, and the sharpness of her mind. He knew that tonight would be different. This was not just another visit. It was a night that would test them both in ways neither could yet fully understand. When he arrived, the house was quiet, the smoke from the chimney curling gently into the night sky. He dismounted, tying his horse to a sturdy post, and approached the door slowly. Every step was measured, respectful, as if he understood that he was entering not just a home, but a space that represented her independence, her strength, and the life she had built for herself. The giant bride opened the door almost immediately. Her eyes, sharp and assessing as ever, met his. There was no greeting, no small talk. Instead, there was the silent acknowledgement that something important was about to happen.
"You're here," she said simply. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." "I thought it was the right time," he replied calmly.
I wanted to see how we do together tonight. She studied him for a long moment, the faintest flicker of curiosity passing over her face. Most men would have given up long before this, she said, her voice soft but firm. They don't understand that surviving the night with me is more than just being present. It's about patience, strength, and respect. But I understand, he said, and I'm not most men. There was a pause, a stillness in the air as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, without another word, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The warmth of the house greeted him, the scent of firewood and fresh bread wrapping around him like a comforting cloak. Inside, everything was in its place, tools neatly arranged, shelves orderly, and the soft glow of the fire casting long shadows across the room. It was a home that spoke of independence, care, and attention to detail. They began the night slowly. There was no rush, no pressure, only presence.
They moved through the tasks of the house together, preparing food, tending to the small animals she kept nearby, and maintaining the space they shared. Every action was deliberate, a dance of observation and respect.
She tested him in small ways, challenging him to lift heavy objects, carry water from a distant well, and demonstrate patience when things did not go smoothly. He met each test calmly, never rushing, never showing frustration, and never underestimating her strength. As the hours passed, the tension between them began to shift. It was no longer just a challenge or a test. It was a meeting of equals, two strong, independent people learning to navigate each other's presence. The rancher noticed the small gestures, the ways she softened when she thought no one was looking, the moments when her curiosity overcame her caution.
She noticed his attentiveness, the way he observed without judgment, the way he adjusted to her pace without trying to dominate.
At one point, as they worked together to prepare a simple meal, she paused and looked at him directly. "You know," she said quietly, "I've never met a man who could stay calm when I challenge him. Most become impatient or try to prove themselves. But you simply meet me where I am."
"I think that's the only way to truly connect with someone," he replied.
Not by overpowering them, but by understanding them, matching their pace, and respecting their strength. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile, a brief, fleeting expression that spoke of approval and a recognition of his courage. It was a rare moment, one that revealed a vulnerability she usually kept hidden. She had built walls around herself for years, guarding against disappointment, betrayal, and the assumptions of others. Yet here was a man who neither sought to break down those walls nor was intimidated by them. He simply acknowledged their existence and respected them. The night deepened and the temperature dropped slightly. They moved to the fire, sitting near its warmth, sharing quiet conversation that was both light-hearted and meaningful. They spoke of their pasts, their experiences, and the lessons they had learned from life's challenges. She shared stories of hardship and independence, moments that had shaped her into the person she had become. He listened, not with pity, but with understanding, offering insight and reflections that showed he valued her strength without undermining it. A storm began to stir in the distance, the wind picking up and carrying the faint scent of rain. Instead of causing panic, it brought an opportunity for teamwork. They worked together to secure the house, reinforcing doors and windows, moving tools to safer places, and ensuring the animals were protected. In the process, they discovered how well they could rely on each other. Her strength and experience combined seamlessly with his patience and practical knowledge. By the time the first raindrops fell, they had created a space of safety and stability together. Sitting by the fire after the storm began, they allowed themselves a rare moment of relaxation. The rain tapped gently against the roof, and the fire cast a warm glow around the room. There was a quiet intimacy in the air. Not romantic in the traditional sense, but profound in its depth of understanding. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and said softly, "I've never had a man truly meet me like this. Most fear me or try to change me, Bert. You simply respect who I am. I think that's how every meaningful connection should be," he replied. "Respect, understanding, and patience. No one should ever have to face life alone unless they choose to." For the first time in many years, she allowed herself to feel a sense of connection that did not require walls, defenses, or pretense. She felt seen, not just for her strength, but for her vulnerabilities, her experiences, and her spirit. Brace. The rancher's presence was steady, comforting, and reliable. It was a balance she had not known she needed. Brace. The night progressed. They continued to share stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. There were small challenges along the way, tasks that required cooperation, problem-solving, and patience, but each was met with calm determination and mutual respect.
They learned to communicate without words at times, understanding each other's needs and boundaries instinctively.
The giant bride realized that surviving the night with him was not about endurance or resistance. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness to meet another strong person as an equal. Hours passed, and the night reached its deepest point. The storm had moved on, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air, and the soft sounds of nature returning to the land. They sat quietly, the fire reduced to glowing embers, and let the silence speak for them. It was a silence filled with understanding, acknowledgement, and a growing bond that neither had expected. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Breaths. I think I understand now. You're not like the others. You've met me where I am, not where I'm supposed to be. That's prayer.
And that's the only way it should be, he replied softly.
Strength isn't just about what we can do alone. It's also about what we can share with someone who respects us and meets us as equals. A quiet smile passed between them, one that spoke of mutual respect, understanding, and the beginnings of trust. The giant bride had always been wary of men, wary of their intentions, and wary of the way the world often underestimated her. But this man was different. He had not only survived the night but had done so in a way that honored her strength, her independence, and her spirit. As the first light of dawn began to peek through the windows, painting the room in soft shades of pink and gold, there was a sense of completion. The night had been long, filled with challenges, laughter, reflection, and quiet understanding. Both had learned something valuable about themselves and each other. The giant bride realized that strength could be shared without losing independence. The rancher understood that true courage was not about overcoming obstacles alone, but about meeting others with respect, patience, and understanding. They rose together as the day began, preparing for the morning with a sense of calm satisfaction. The giant bride's home, once a place of solitude and guarded strength, had become a space of mutual respect and understanding. The rancher's presence had not changed her. It had allowed her to recognize her own strength in a new light, and to appreciate the rare quality of a man who could meet her without trying to control her. Before leaving, the rancher looked at her with a calm, steady expression. "But thank you," he said simply, "for letting me share this night with you."
Bruce, I've learned a lot, and I hope you have too.
She nodded, a small but genuine smile on her face. You've surprised me, she admitted.
Most men never understand. You did. That matters. He mounted his horse, preparing to ride back to his own ranch. As he did, there was a sense of anticipation for the future. a future that neither could predict, but one that now held possibility. They had survived the night together, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. They had built a foundation of trust, respect, and understanding that would guide their interactions in the days to come. The rancher rode across the plains, the morning light brightening the horizon. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that something rare and valuable had begun. And somewhere behind him, the giant bride watched from her doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face, knowing that the night had changed something in her as well. Neither of them knew what the next meeting would bring, but they both understood one simple truth. True strength was not measured by dominance or control, but by respect, understanding, and the courage to meet another strong person on equal terms. And in that understanding, a connection had been forged that neither could ignore, a connection that promised challenges, growth, and a partnership built on mutual trust. The night had been survived, but more importantly, it had been experienced. A shared journey of patience, respect, and discovery. And as the sun rose fully over the plains, there was a quiet sense of hope, anticipation, and the promise of something extraordinary just beginning. The morning sun bathed the plains in golden light, casting long shadows over the ranch and the surrounding fields. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the faint scent of grass and soil. The rancher rode slowly toward the giant bride's home, his horse moving steadily beneath him. The events of the previous night played in his mind, the quiet understanding, the teamwork, the laughter, and the moments of reflection. Grasp. He knew that things had shifted between them. It was no longer just curiosity or caution. A bond had begun to form, subtle but undeniable. When he arrived at her home, he dismounted, patting his horse and guiding it to graze nearby. The giant bride was already outside, tending to her small garden, her movements calm and precise. The fire from the hearth had long since died down, leaving the morning air crisp and clean. She looked up as he approached, her sharp eyes meeting his, a hint of warmth now accompanying her usual caution. "You came early again," she said, her voice steady but carrying a note of curiosity. "I wanted to see how the day begins here," he replied with a smile. "Pay. And to continue what we started last night." She considered him silently for a moment, then nodded slightly. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. She was beginning to recognize that he was not just another man to test or fear. He was someone she could measure against herself, someone whose strength and patience matched her own. They began their day together, moving through the tasks that needed attention around the house and garden. The rancher carried water, helped repair fences, and assisted with chores, all while letting her lead. He did not try to dominate or take control, nor did he shrink back. Instead, he moved in harmony with her, respecting her space, her decisions, and her strength. She noticed this, as did he, and it created a rhythm between them, a silent understanding that neither needed to speak aloud. During a brief pause, she looked at him and spoke softly, almost as if testing her own words.
"You've changed the way I see things," she admitted. "Most men would have left after the first challenge, or tried to prove themselves in ways that mattered more to them than to me."
You stayed, and you adapted.
That's not common. He nodded, choosing his words carefully.
"It's not about proving myself. It's about understanding. Strength isn't something to show off. It's something to share, to use wisely, and to respect in others." Her expression softened, a small but genuine smile appearing. It was the first time he had seen her let down her guard so openly. She had built walls for years, walls that protected her from disappointment and hurt. But now she realized that not everyone would seek to dismantle those walls. Some would meet her at eye level, respecting the structure she had built and appreciating it rather than challenging it. They shared a simple breakfast together, sitting on the porch as the morning light warmed their faces. The conversation was easy, flowing naturally between observations about the land, stories of past experiences, and reflections on life. There was humor, there was curiosity, and there was a growing respect that was palpable. The giant bride found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, enjoying the calm presence of someone who did not intimidate or underestimate her. As the day progressed, they worked together to complete small projects around the property. The rancher repaired a section of the fence, while she organized tools and tended to the animals. There was a sense of partnership in their actions, a silent acknowledgement that they were learning from one another, and that they could rely on each other. It was not just physical labor. It was an exercise in trust, patience, and communication. By mid-afternoon, they paused under the shade of a large tree, the soft rustle of leaves above creating a peaceful atmosphere. The giant bride spoke, her voice quieter now, filled with reflection. "I never thought I'd meet someone who could handle my intensity," she said. "Not just the physical, but the mental, the emotional. Most people are frightened by it, or think they need to control it. You don't."
I don't, he replied calmly. I respect it.
"I respect you. Strength isn't something to fear. It's something to recognize and honor."
And I think that's true for both of us. She considered his words carefully, realizing the truth in them. For years, she had believed that independence and strength meant standing alone, pushing everyone else away, and trusting no one. But now she saw that strength could coexist with partnership, that courage could be shared, and that mutual respect could form the foundation of something lasting. But now, as the afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm glow across the land, they continued to work together side by side. Each small task, each shared moment, built a deeper understanding between them. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just steady, thoughtful actions that demonstrated care, respect, and trust. It was a rhythm that both recognized a bond that grew stronger with each passing hour. As evening approached, the rancher and the giant bride sat on the porch, watching the sun set in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The world was quiet, the only sounds the distant calls of birds returning to their nests and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. Bah. In that calm, reflective moment, they shared their thoughts about what had passed between them, the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. "You've changed the way I think about connection," she said quietly. I used to believe that strength and independence meant solitude, but now I see that it can mean partnership too, if the other person respects and understands you.
"And I've learned that strength is not just about doing things alone," he replied. "It's about recognizing it in others, supporting it, and being willing to meet it without fear. That's what makes a partnership meaningful." There was a long pause, filled with quiet reflection. They both understood that what had begun between them was rare, a connection built not on desire or fear, but on respect.
It was a partnership of equals, where neither sought to dominate or control the other, and both recognized the value of the other's strength.
As night fell, the stars appearing one by one in the clear sky, they continued their quiet conversation, sharing thoughts, reflections, and small stories from their past. The giant bride spoke of her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the moments that had shaped her into the person she had become. The rancher listened attentively, offering insights and reflections that showed he valued her experiences and respected her strength. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the land, there was a sense of completion, a feeling that something significant had begun. The giant bride looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight, and said softly, I think I trust you. Not just tonight, but moving forward. You've shown me that strength can coexist with partnership, and that courage can be shared. Berdias. And I trust you, he replied. I've seen your strength, your courage,
and your independence. I respect it, and I've learned from it. That's what makes this meaningful. For the first time in many years, the giant bride allowed herself to feel the possibility of something lasting, something real, and something built on mutual respect rather than fear or control. She realized that trust did not mean losing independence, that strength did not require solitude, and that partnership could exist without compromise of self. The rancher and the giant bride spent the remainder of the evening in quiet companionship, moving through the house, tending to the fire, and preparing for the night ahead. There was a sense of calm, a rhythm that neither had experienced before, and a shared understanding that this was more than a simple visit. It was the beginning of a new chapter in both of their lives. As they finally retired for the night, the giant bride looked at him, a small smile on her face. "You've surprised me," she said.
Most men would have failed long ago.
You've met me on my terms and respected my strength. That matters more than you know.
Brash. And you've shown me the value of courage, independence, and understanding, he replied. I've learned as much from you as you have from me.
Bet. Instead, it was filled with understanding, respect, and the subtle joy of discovering a connection built on equality. By morning, both knew that the bond they had begun would shape the days to come. They had faced challenges, shared experiences, and found common ground that neither could ignore. The next day, the rancher rode back across the plains, the sun rising behind him, filling the sky with shades of gold and pink. He felt a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for what was to come. The giant bride had opened a door he had never expected, and he knew that the connection between them was rare and valuable.
It was not built on stories, reputation, or fear, but on respect, courage, and mutual understanding.
And somewhere behind him, the giant bride watched from her doorway, feeling a sense of calm and hope she had not felt in years. The night had tested them both, not just in endurance, but in character, patience, and trust, and they had passed together, emerging with a bond stronger than either had anticipated. They both knew that the future held challenges, obstacles, and moments that would test their partnership further, but they also knew that they had discovered something rare, a connection built on respect, courage, and the willingness to meet another strong person as an equal. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with potential, trust, and the quiet thrill of a partnership forged in patience and understanding. As the rancher rode back to his own home, the giant bride watched him disappear across the plains, a sense of anticipation and excitement stirring within her. The days ahead would be full of shared experiences, laughter, challenges, and learning. But they would face them together, as equals, as partners, and as people who had discovered the value of respect, courage, and connection. The sun climbed higher, filling the land with light, and the world seemed to pause, acknowledging the start of something extraordinary. Two strong, independent people had met on equal ground, survived challenges together, and discovered the quiet power of trust, respect, and partnership. The story that had begun with curiosity, caution, and challenge now moved forward with hope, anticipation, and the promise of a shared future.